Hello there, everyone. We're continuing on our discussion here of the word diakonia this time, which is just another variation of diakonos, or deacons is how we would transliterate it, commonly translated as ministers or minister. So this particular variation is diakonia that we're going to look at today. So again, if you haven't seen the previous videos on this, please at least watch the one that is prefixed by WTC12 deacons and ministers, and you'll understand what we're doing here if you watch that video. Okay, so we're looking at the word diakonia. Again, we're going to quickly look at the definition according to the Dictionary of Biblical Languages with Semantic Domains, Greek New Testament, and this is the numbering within the numbering system of that particular dictionary. This is number 1355. This particular word, though, diakonia, in Strong's is 1248. Okay, so again, this word means service, help, ministry, role or position of service, provision, arrangement for support, contribution, waiting upon, etc. It's used in secular writings as well as sometimes in biblical writings to wait tables and so on. It is to serve, not to exalt oneself or to rule over, but to serve. So again, this word many times is used more so diakonia. The thing that distinguishes this from diakonos, which we already saw, diakonos means more so servant. So we saw many times it was used in a singular form, not always, but it's used in a singular form to refer to somebody being a servant, like Jesus Christ, a servant, Phoebe, a servant, Paul, Apollos, Epaphras. All these people were called servants, and that was the word diakonos. So now we're looking at diakonia, and this is, essentially meaning the ministry, or those who are involved in servitude. So just so you can understand it a little bit better, two places that show this in a very inclusive sense are, first we're going to look at Ephesians 4 verses 11 and 12. And you'll see kind of the context here. It says, "And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ." So again, the word ministry is diakonia. And so this, again shows that the ministry, the diakonia, is, inclusive of people who have received all the gifts. Also in 1 Corinthians 12:5, we see this word. It's translated a little bit differently here. It says, "And there are differences of administrations, but the same Lord." So again, the word administrations there is actually the same word, diakonia. And so it's the ministry at large, which includes all the believers. And again, read any of these passages, especially 1 Corinthians 12 and Ephesians chapter 4, and you can see in the context there it's referring to all believers being part of this ministry, this, diakonia. So we're going to look at some more specific references to specific people being considered part of this diakonia. We actually have Judas being referred to as being part of this ministry. In Acts 1:17 it says, "For he was numbered with us and had obtained part of this ministry," this diakonia. Matthias, who replaced him, in Acts chapter 1 verse 25, it refers to him as being part of this diakonia. It says that he may take part of this ministry and apostleship, from which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place. So again, I want you to notice something here. This word that is usually applied to a low status of ministers, leadership, or a high status of lay people, this word deacon, notice here that it's being used to refer to apostles, right? we just saw that it refers to all believers, but then here it's also referring to apostles. So we're seeing in the New Testament a broad use of this term, and if it was to be consistently translated without additions by translators, we would have a very clear understanding of what this is saying. But because of different hierarchical structures that have been set up over the centuries, and different exaltations of man, exaltations of position and title. Because of that, we have had inconsistent translations because the translators have been compelled to translate these words in harmony with the ideas of the day. So again, another place that uses this to refer to the apostles is Acts 6:4, which says, "But we will give ourselves continually to prayer and to the ministry of the word." Again, ministry, diakonia. Paul is referred to as being part of the ministry, the diakonia, in Acts 12:25, Acts 21:19, and 1 Timothy 1:12. And again, we're not going to read them all because we've gone through this in the previous videos, and by now you should be getting the point. So I'm not going to read every verse here, especially those relative to Paul, because we've already read a fair amount showing where he stands in this regards. Again, we have some which refer to Paul and others in general that you can find in 2 Corinthians 4:1, in 2 Corinthians 5:18, in 2 Corinthians 8:4. So those refer to Paul and others as being part of the diakonia. In Acts 12:25, we have Barnabas. It says, "And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry, and took with them John, whose surname was Mark." So again, Barnabas and Saul, also known as Paul. We have the house of Stephanas. In 1 Corinthians 16:15, it says, "I beseech you, brethren, ye know the house of Stephanas, that it is the firstfruits of Achaia," if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, "and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints." So again, they have joined unto the ministry, to the diakonia. And we have Archippus. In Colossians 4:17, it says, "And say to Archippus, take heed to the ministry which thou hast received in the Lord, that thou fulfill it." That's an interesting passage because it's not, again, that is clearly showing that this word, diakonia, is not being portrayed as positions or titles to attain to, but rather roles to be fulfilled. I hope you understand the distinction. It's not, somebody could be have a title of being a pastor, or have a title of being a president, or any different title. And they could just have that title. It doesn't mean that they're doing anything. It doesn't mean that they're fulfilling it. It just means that that's what people call them. It's a title that they have, or it's a position that they hold. But here, it's saying to Archippus, Paul is writing to him saying, take heed that you fulfill this role. It's a very functional thing. Take heed that you minister to others, that you take part in this diakonia. And so continuing with Timothy, in 2 Timothy 4:5, it says, "But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry," this of your diakonia. Again, it's something that's to be proved. It's not like, okay, Timothy, now you're part of this diakonia, that's that, you have this title, and notice one of the gifts that he had was evangelism. So this is a broad, there's many gifts, many administrations, many servitudes, positions of service, we could say, or roles of service is probably a better way of putting it. Mark is also referred to by use of this word. 2 Timothy 4:11, "Only Luke is with me. Take Mark and bring him with thee, for he is profitable to me for the ministry," for the service. The next one is also very interesting. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 14. It says, Are they not all ministering spirits, sent forth to minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation? Now that, and please go ahead and read the context, but talking about these ministering spirits, these are the angels. Angels are also part of the ministry, the diakonia in this specific use. They are diakonos, ministers. Now it's very interesting because, as we saw in the previous videos, this here is totally consistent with what we've previously learned, especially in the first video in this whole series or playlist. If you go and check it out, WTC1, What is the Church? You'll see that we found that according to the New Testament, when it uses this church ecclesia, which is church or congregation or assembly, we found that it is referring to all in the whole universe of God's created beings who are joined unto Christ, whether human or not. In other words, they could be angels, they could be any of God's creation. And so here it's showing that they are also part, since they are part of the church, they are part of the ministry, servants. They are all servants. Showing this whole system that God has, His whole universe of beings, is designed to serve each other. We are designed not to be selfish, but to be selfless, to be self-sacrificing, and to be others-centered rather than self-centered. So, again, this is a very broad thing. It's not just, oh, these are deacons. Here's a deacon. This is one specific role. You guys have this title, and you guys, it's your job to collect offering, which is another issue, which perhaps we'll get into in other videos. But we have a very narrow conception of this in modern Christianity, and unfortunately in traditional Christianity that has been going on throughout the centuries. So one last usage of this word is another interesting one, again because it's referring to a female, a woman, actually Martha in this instance. So was she a deacon? Well, I'll put it like this. If we're to use our very narrow conceptions of the word deacon, most Christians would not accept a woman as part of deacons. But again, part of that, there's two misconceptions there. There's misconceptions as to gender roles, which I have a playlist in this channel called Gender Roles. Please check that out, and you'll see that how people portray gender roles in both church functions as far as the gospel ministry and as far as just life in general, society, home life. People are misunderstanding gender roles and gender equality. We're equal in Christ, I'll just say that. So that's one aspect of this misconception. The other aspect is misconception of the word deacon, which is what this particular few videos is about. So again, Martha here, she is called a deacon, or she is part of the, diakonos, or the diakonia, specifically in this instance. Luke chapter 10 verse 40 says, "But Martha was cumbered about with much serving," diakonia, "and came to him and said, Lord, dost thou care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she may help me." So again, we have here diakonia. It is a position of servitude. I hope you can see the different aspects that are coming through here, and I hope that your understanding of this word and of the different connotations that it carries with it, I hope that your understanding is broadening as we go through this subject, and hopefully you'll be able to understand a little bit better how the New Testament church is supposed to operate, and not just the New Testament church. I mean, this goes back far beyond what we call the New Testament. This is just talking about God's people in general, in the whole universe. This is how people are supposed to operate. So hopefully this gives you a better concept and a broader concept, bring you from perhaps narrow sectarianism to more of a cosmic perspective. Viewing this thing on a very broad, eternal scale, looking at the broad view of this, both in terms of time and space. So hopefully, again, hopefully you're getting a blessing out of this. Feel free to comment if you have any questions. I'm not going to guarantee I can answer everything. I don't know everything. But if you have anything to say or anything you'd like to discuss, please comment below or send me a message or contact me in whichever way suits you best. So blessings to you all, and peace.